Hi, my name is Christine Herzog, and I'm the Managing Director of the Smart Grid Library. And with me today is Jeanne Fox. She is the co-vice chair of NARUC's Committee on Critical Infrastructure. NARUC stands for National Association of Regulatory Utility Commissioners. And Jeanne is also a member of the New Jersey Board of Public Utilities Commissioners. So welcome today. So you wear a number of different hats here, Jeanne. But let's focus in on the work that you're doing with NARUC. So can you first explain what the National Association of Regulatory Commissioners is all about and the role that it plays in working with the 50 U.S. states regulatory agencies?
Yeah, I mean, NARUC is the National Association of all the utility commissioners from 50 states, plus Puerto Rico, District of Columbia. And we meet together 3 times a year. We have a lot of committees and educate each other about what's going on. Mm-hmm. As we know, the states are the laboratories for the country. We work closely with the federal agencies like Department of Energy, Environmental Protection Agency, and others. And we represent all the utility commissioners to Washington, to the different federal agencies, Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, etc., Congress, present testimony to them, adopt resolutions. So it really is an educational opportunity to educate our fellow commissioners. Most commissioners, I've been a commissioner for almost 12 years. The average life of a commissioner is 3 years around the country. So we have to continually educate each other.
So in terms of what the Committee on Critical Infrastructure is focused on, that could cover quite a lot of territory because in the United States, regulatory agencies have visibility and control over electricity, gas, water grids, as well as transportation and telecommunications. So let's put this in the lens of the recent storms that really impacted New Jersey quite heavily, Superstorm Sandy, but there were several others as well. Can you give us some sense of the quantification of how much damage that wrought, and in particular, let's focus in on electricity and what the electric utility infrastructure looked like after that, and where do we go from here?
Well, there are 2 things that we look at. One is cybersecurity and cyber terrorism.
That's a good point.
Huge concern. Mm-hmm. Phil Jones, our national president, that's his thing for this year, and I'll tell you, it's very scary. Mm-hmm. But then the infrastructure. And Sandy is a very good example. In New Jersey, it's about the size of the Netherlands. Mm-hmm. It's got something like 8.8 million people, of which 70% of them were without electricity for up to 2 weeks. This is in a very wealthy state, mm-hmm. and people are used to not having very, very reliable electric systems. So what this has gotten us to, we have been focused on reliability and security of the grid system really since 9/11 in 01. Mm-hmm. We set up by legislation a domestic security task force in New Jersey that I worked on starting in 02 really heavily. So the infrastructure is in place, and we have continued since that time for over 10 years now, have looked at both tourism and how that can impact the infrastructure, as well as extreme weather events. Mm-hmm. We know climate change is happening, in many ways can influence the infrastructure, and Sandy proves that out. Mm-hmm. There's not a direct causal link, but there are scientists who say because of certain weather conditions over Greenland and the Arctic, hurricanes traditionally go into the ocean. They did not. Mm-hmm. Sandy came straight online. Mm-hmm. A year before Sandy, which happened last year in 2012, we had Irene. We were told Irene was a 100-year storm. Sandy came, which was a 300 or 500-year storm. So there are things that are happening. Mm-hmm. New Jersey is a peninsula, basically between New York and Philadelphia. And we have a lot of streams, and it's low-lying, like the Netherlands. We've had sea level rise in the last 40 years of about maybe a foot or so. Sea level rise actually coming up, and also the land along the eastern seaboard of the mid-Atlantic states is lowering because we've taken water out of the ground. Mm-hmm. So it was devastating, and the Board of Public Utilities ordered, working with the governor's office then, ordered the 4 electric companies to do a major evaluation. We hired consultants to look at it, and this past year we ordered them to do over 100 different things regarding that. PSEG, Public Service Electric and Gas, is our largest electric and gas company. They serve about 70% of the electric customers. They came in this past year with a petition for an almost $4 billion 10-year project to harden their system. Obviously, it's a proceeding before us. I can't go into the details, but
can you give us some sense of what electric utility would define as hardening their system?
well, the substations, over 60 of their substations were underwater between Irene and Sandy. Between those two, only a couple overlapped. That's serious. It's also expensive. So they're looking at whether they should raise them, whether they should put a wall around them. They're looking at some limited undergrounding in certain areas of the electric wires. So it's that type of thing. Also, we need to smarten the grid, smarten the distribution system, and hopefully they're looking at that as well.
And you also mentioned cybersecurity as a very important issue, and of course that's worldwide. How are utilities approaching hardening their infrastructure with regards to the cyber issues?
Well, we're very active, we being the utility commissions and my committee in particular, critical infrastructure, and working with the federal government, with the Homeland Security, the Department of Energy. Monies have been given by the federal government to states to do this, pilot projects. It's really such a big area that you really need to share best practices to stay on top of it. We have threats from some other nations. We have threats, financial threats as well. That's a huge concern.
Are there any best practices that have been identified so far that you would say we really see that this is a good example, or this is a good
Well, it's really
policy?
an IT issue, and it's staying on top of it. The United States has experts, like other countries have experts, and so they're the ones that we get briefed on a fairly regular basis about what's going on.
Jeanne, why don't you tell us what are you doing? As in the Committee on Critical Infrastructure, what are some of the actions that are ongoing and the initiatives there?
What we're primarily focusing on is cyber tourism, cyber security, as well as hardening. And we've been working on hardening for the last 10, 11 years because of 9/11. And the security aspects with cyber tourism as well. So that's a major focus. For the states, like a state like New Jersey, we're looking at hardening the systems, what we talked about. We're looking at communications. It was not a pretty picture with elected municipal officials when they couldn't tell their residents when they would have electricity back and what the situation was. That's improved greatly since Irene in 2011. Thank God for Irene, because 2012 was horrible with Sandy. We also are looking at distributed energy resources a lot more. Places like Rutgers University, which is a state university, 65,000 students, Princeton University, an Ivy League in New Jersey, they actually islanded off the system during Sandy so they could continue to operate because they had combined heat and power. And so New Jersey is now putting more money into that, and there's a lot of other institutions. We have over 200 combined heat and power facilities, universities, hospitals, critical structures like that. That's a part of critical infrastructure development where you have islands where people can go when they have no electricity. And then finally, fighting extreme weather events, reducing greenhouse gas emissions is important. And so you do that through energy efficiency and renewables. New Jersey has a Global Warming Response Act, which requires 70% reduction of greenhouse gases by 2050, I think it is. So they're really the four pieces of it.
Okay, so I heard you mention something about resiliency here in terms of the islanding, and that's always a very important concept in transactive energy too. What kind of initiatives are on the horizon, and not necessarily just within New Jersey, but that you see across with all the other states in terms of encouraging utilities to do more to make the grids resilient as well as reliable?
Well, California, our largest state, is doing a lot through the different government agencies. So they have a requirement to have combined heat and power now. New Jersey legislature is looking at that, but that's really the first state that's done that. And again, with our national association, we share this type of information in different areas for best practices. People are doing energy efficiency portfolio standards. Different states are doing that. That helps reduce that need. but you really need to deal with the grid structure as a whole. So it's a smart grid.
Right.
You know where the outages are, where the distribution system as well, so you know where the outages are that gets us back up faster, because that's what customers want.
Do you see that more integrating more renewables at the distribution grid level may also help in terms of adding resiliency? Because the state of New Jersey has actually been very good about that.
Yes, New Jersey is second only to California. I believe we have the best policies for solar in the country. We created a solar marketplace that's market-based. That's important. We really need to I've been frustrated that we're not putting enough resources into storage research, energy storage. There are some companies in New Jersey and elsewhere that have really very good products, and I'm really hopeful that in the next year or two we'll have 6-hour storage facilities for individual buildings. And that's when renewables will become much more useful, because unfortunately they're intermittent. And we don't know when it's going to be windy, and we don't know when it's going to be sunny. And so for the grid system, for our grid managers, like our PJM system, which is the largest in the world, you need the frequency regulations because of that intermittency. So storage really is the silver bullet, and is really the holy grail to make renewables much more an integral part. That's when we can eliminate fossil fuels after we have some really good storage.
Well, it does seem to be very hand in glove, that you need both the renewables plus energy storage to get the full value out of either one of them. Well, I think we've reached the end of our session here, so I want to thank you again, Jeanne Fox. You're the co-chair of the NARUC, National Association of Regulatory Utility Commissioners Committee on Critical Infrastructure, and you're as well a commissioner with the New Jersey Board of Public Utilities. So thank you so much for your time and for sharing your insights today on how we can make our grids more resilient and harden our critical infrastructure.
Thanks for having me, Christy.
All right, thank you.